Story 1. My partner ruined dinner on purpose. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy. Thanks. Since I'm pregnant, it's possible that the hormones are to blame for my irritability. A couple of days ago, we went out and purchased the ingredients necessary to make stew. After I 30F mentioned to my husband 37M last night that I was going to make stew after work today, and that I was going to throw the meat in the oven in the morning, he said that he would cube the meat for me. I texted him while I was getting ready to go into my office that I was going to throw the meat in at noon when I was on my first break, so if he wanted it cubed, please do so before he leaves for work. This morning, we were getting up at more or less the same time, give or take a half hour. I told him that I was going to throw the meat in at noon when I was on my first break. Simple enough request. After that text was sent, he left for work about an hour later, and he never responded to any of my messages. The clock struck noon, and I dashed into the kitchen to get things going, only to discover that the meat had not yet been touched in any way. I interpreted this to mean that he did not care whether or not it was cubed because he was asked about it and given a timeline, but he did not cube it and did not communicate that he would like it to be done that way. Therefore, I put it in whole with the intention of instead disassembling it at a later time. Around 13:30, he arrives home from work after having been gone for some time. After checking on the meat in the oven, he discovers that it has not been cut into cubes as instructed. I reminded him that I had mentioned it the night before, and that I had explained what was going to happen to him at 12 o'clock this morning, but at no point did he tell me he wanted the meat cut up in cubes or cube it himself. As time went on, he became increasingly irate about the situation, and he told me that I should have persisted in questioning him until he answered me this morning, or I should have waited until he got home from work, and how it was unreasonable to expect him to cut the meat into cubes before going to work because he hadn't gone to bed until almost 8 in the morning, meaning he had only gotten a couple of hours of sleep, and therefore didn't have the time to do it before going to work. I had to remind him once more that he had already been warned. Since he doesn't take a shower or do anything else before going to work, he was wide awake well in advance of the time he needed to leave for it, so he had plenty of time to finish the job. Or you could just respond to my text in the next 10 seconds and tell me to wait until I get home. Because of this, he is currently fuming and telling me that everything I'm saying is just an excuse to make me feel better about being lazy. Despite the fact that I am aware that his preference is for it to be cubed and that the last time I made stew with stringy beef, he found it disgusting. The situation finally came to a head during my break for lunch. Because he claimed that I was too lazy to do it the right way, he was acting completely unreasonable and throwing a fit. He also threatened to throw away all of the meat. I informed him that he was acting like a jackass. He told me that I was just being defensive, that I wasn't listening, and that I was avoiding taking any responsibility for my actions. We walked off in different directions. After that, he went to the living room, and I went to my office. He eventually came back to talk to me again after he made the decision to calm down. This time, he said that he wished I'd learned to communicate instead of getting defensive and acting like I was being attacked. He said that if I had said, "Okay, I apologize, and now I know that's your preference for next time," or texted him at noon to follow up before I put it in, then he would have told me to wait or that he wanted it cubed. And all of this could have been avoided. He also said that he wished I'd learned to communicate instead of getting. He suggested that if he did not want the meat in the stew to be pulled apart, we could try cooking it and letting it cool, as my personal experience has taught me that beef cuts much more easily when it is cold. Or, we could make it into a roast and serve it with mashed potatoes and gravy. This would be another option. I also suggested that if he didn't want the meat to be pulled apart for the stew, we could finish cooking it and let it cool before slicing it, as my experience has shown that beef slices much better when it is cold. Alternatively, we could prepare it as a roast and serve it with mashed potatoes and gravy. He didn't have a strong opinion either way about the two choices presented to him, so he went off to play video games for a while before heading back to work. At some point, he made the decision to continue cooking the meat by placing it back in the oven. He did not consult me about what temperature to set it to. He did not let me know he had put it back on, and I do not know when it was put in. He did not let me know he had put it back on. When I walked out of my office after getting off work approximately 2 hours after he had left to go back to work, I noticed how hot the oven smelled. I finally get out of my office for the first time in more than 2 hours to check on it, and I find that the temperature in the oven has been set to 400 degrees. Even though I filled the roaster with water to the point where it was almost covering the meat when I initially put it in the oven, There is not a single drop of water left in it after I removed it. The entire interior of the roaster is completely blackened by the fire. I am unsure whether the meat can be salvaged, and I do not have any drippings left over with which to prepare anything. As a result, I am currently standing in the kitchen with a roaster that is completely blackened, possibly inedible meat that cost $20, and no idea what I will prepare for dinner. I don't know for sure, and there's no way for me to verify it one way or the other, but I believe he did it on purpose. Even if he did, I don't think you could ever get him to admit it. My plans for food have been derailed, and I don't have any other options lined up, so I'm feeling extremely hungry as well as frustrated about the situation.